Hey there, this is Natalie, and this is a slightly late Valentine's special. I wanted to record it yesterday, but my voice was just too wrecked from the karaoke stream with Anime OT the night before. Apologies too if there's any weird background noise on this video. They're chainsawing bits off of the trees outside my house, and it seems like they're going to be doing it all day. So I'm going to try to edit out any noise from that my mic picks up, but if you can hear any strange sounds behind me, that's what that is. So here's the idea. In ReZero so far, not a lot of characters have gotten themselves written into any in-world romances. This is perfectly reasonable while there's so much going on for these characters, but with all of these attractive single people knocking around, I thought it would be fun to make a series of videos looking at possible ships for some of the characters who've so far been pretty unlucky in that respect. I'll be looking at the characters they have been somewhat tied to so far, and other members of the cast who could make possible matches, as well as some wildcard options that could be interesting. So for the first one of these, for Valentine's Day, I've picked Ram. I'm going to keep this video safe for anime onlys, so I won't refer to any characters from beyond where we are in the anime. However, while I'll keep things vague and won't spoil any plot points from future arcs, I will be considering later arcs in things like whether or not Ram has met or interacted with the other person much, just because otherwise there's a lot less to go on. So if you hear me say something like that Ram has interacted with, say, Julius a fair amount, and you can't think of them ever speaking to each other in the anime, then just trust that they'll have some scenes they're both in at an unspecified point in the future. Please consider subscribing if you want to see more ReZero content, including theories, analysis, coverage of the latest anime episodes and web novel chapters, and lighter stuff like this. And with that out of the way, let's get straight into some potential matches for Ram. First, let's look at the characters Ram does have some canon romance potential with. Garfiel, who has a massive crush on her, and Roswaal, who Ram is completely devoted to. While Garfiel and Ram definitely have some cute scenes together, and their interactions in Season 2 episodes 15 and 16 definitely make it feel like a romance between them would be fun to watch, the issue here is that Ram is a bit too old for Garf. Where Garfiel is only 14 in Arc 4, he's not really a suitable partner for Ram at this point in the story, where she most likely thinks of him as a kid. The age difference isn't huge, with Ram only being 3 or 4 years older, and wouldn't really be an issue once Garfiel's an adult, but with the royal selection set to last for 3 years, it's possible that that's going to be as far into the future as this story goes, and so we may never get to see these two at the point where Garf would be old enough for Ram to see him as mature enough for her. As well as this, there is another ship for Garfiel that I won't talk about because it's a spoiler, and I think that one is better for his character than Ram. With Garfiel, Ram is someone to look up to, as well as someone to trust, and I think he will in time grow out of needing someone in that role so much, especially if he gets Frederica back in his life as a big sister. I think Ram will always be important to him, and she'll probably end up with a really nice, solid friendship with him, though one that will perhaps go too far back into what he might see as an embarrassing phase once he's older, something Ram would definitely always tease him about, for him to continue to have a crush on her after he's grown up some more. Then there's Roswaal. He's a lot older than Ram, with Roswaal J Mathers being around 30, so maturity isn't an issue, but, well, the word cute is not really one that comes to mind when thinking about Roswaal. Ram's devotion to Roswaal was there before she lost her memories of Rem, though that certainly made it stronger, where without knowing her sister, she now cares only for him, and she is sincere with it. She's devoted to Roswaal in a similar way to how Rem is with Subaru, to the point where self-sacrifice isn't an issue for her. But even though she acts like she'll do anything Roswaal says, she'll also act of her own accord if she thinks it's in his best interests, as we see with her helping Subaru and Otto in Season 2. Roswaal doesn't control her completely, he's just her biggest priority, and this means she could be really good for him. But of course, Roswaal would need to go through a lot of development to be viable as a partner for anyone other than his beloved echidna, and also to be trustworthy enough for a potential relationship with Ram, not meaning her guaranteed doom at some point in his schemes. Roswaal's mindset is that he has to disregard everything and everyone else in pursuit of just one goal, and while he genuinely likes and cares about Ram, she is no exception to that. If Roswaal's character arc sees him growing from this and becoming more like Subaru, rather than the other way around, which is what he currently wants, then Roswaal could end up being a really interesting match for Ram. Their relationship goes way back, and he did save her life, and keeps her healthy where her horn is gone, but he also seems to have done all of this with a purpose for Ram in his endgame, whatever that is. What this is, and whether he ends up seeing it through, could determine whether Roswaal can be redeemed, and whether or not this ship would be a satisfying one to see, or pretty bleak for Ram. Personally, I think Roswaal is probably the most likely partner for Ram if Tappei does decide to give her one, and I think it could be very interesting. But I also think that there are so many issues with Roswaal that it could range from being a nice thing to a pretty dark one in the end. But with Garf and Roswaal, where we actually have something in the story to justify the ships out of the way, let's look at a couple of other characters who spend a lot of time with Ram before going into the long shots and crack ships. First, Subaru. I don't honestly think there's any chance of ReZero having a harem ending, and with Emilia, Rem, and to a point Satella in the mix for Subaru already, he's got his hands full, and not really noticing other girls in a romantic context. One of the things ReZero does far better than just about any other isekai is handling friendships between characters, especially between Subaru and female cast members. Subaru has his love interests, but he also has some really nice friendships with girls who he trusts and respects, like Ram and Crush, and others later on. And this is really a lot more realistic and relatable than every girl he encounters either being a potential love interest or filling some other tropey role. It's not that Subaru doesn't notice that Ram's a beautiful girl with a lot going for her, it's just that the relationship they have has no romantic undertones from either one of them, and is more about a respect that's grown over time, and a fondness that's hidden under savage banter, like most friends. To Subaru, Ram feels more like a potential fourth in the trio of him, Otto and Garfiel, and I just don't see anything romantic there. I also don't think Subaru could ever really feel good about a relationship with a girl who once saw him naked and referred to his junk as that sorry thing. But what about Otto? Unlike Subaru, he doesn't already have a love interest, and in the Emilia camp, disregarding Emilia and Rem for obvious reasons, the only female characters, and I think we can take it that Otto likes girls from some of his reactions and dialogue, left in that group to pair him with, who aren't lollies, are Ram or Frederica. I think I'll make one of these videos specifically for Otto, looking at other characters from outside of the Emilia camp, but of the two, I think he has much better chemistry with Ram. Both characters are very intelligent, and they care about the same people, so their goals often align. Still though, Ram's abrasive nature and Otto's tendency to end up being the whipping boy of the group would certainly make for a pretty Ram-dominant dynamic, and while that would be funny, it doesn't seem like something Otto would be really into, unlike Garf, who loves it. But what about some of the other men in the ReZero world? Ram has spent her time since the Oni village was destroyed between Roswaal's mansion and the sanctuary, and while there aren't any named characters to speak of in the sanctuary that I haven't already covered, living at the mansion of someone as well connected as Roswaal, she knows just about everybody. Plus, being important to Subaru and Emilia, it wouldn't be hard for Tappei to cook up scenarios where she could get better acquainted with just about any of the cast he wanted to have her interact with. I'm going to stick to men, because while we don't know for sure that she doesn't like girls, we do know from her love for Roswaal that she does like men, and since we've all got places to be, well, I don't really since we're pretty much locked down, but let's pretend that reality is less depressing than that. I'm not going to cover all of the female characters as well. Now, the most eligible men we've encountered so far in the anime, who are single and in the right sort of age range, which I'm taking to be from Ram's age up to 30, which is Roswaal's age, would be the knights of the other royal selection candidates, disregarding Al, who's probably a bit too old and a bit too sus. So, first there's Reinhard. I think Ram and Reinhard actually have a fair amount in common when you take into account the fact that Ram was also a child prodigy with all of the expectations of her people put upon her, and was, before she lost her horn, completely OP. As the reincarnation of the Oni god, Ram felt a similar weight of expectation upon her as Reinhard still does as the Sword Saint, but unlike Reinhard, she was to some extent freed from that when her horn was broken. Ram could really understand the pressure Reinhard feels, with the relief she experienced when she lost a lot of her power, and her grounded, frank way of communicating could actually be a breath of fresh air to Reinhard, who's used to everyone acting really formally around him. The plot hasn't really put these two together much, and Reinhard seems to be someone Tappei isn't really giving us any hints about when it comes to whether he's interested in relationships at all, keeping him as a character with way too much on his mind to really be involved in any romantic plots so far. But if he did choose to throw them together, I could actually see this being quite a nice match, weirdly enough. Then there's Julius, who Ram has spent more time with than Reinhard, but who I really don't get the feeling there would be any real spark with, beyond just being cooperative with each other. Julius, if you think about it, who's had to work hard to become as strong as he is and is always looking up to Reinhard, would probably have more in common with Rem than Ram. Finally, we have Felix. This would be a total wild card, because with Felix's devotion to Crush, I don't really see him being paired up with anybody else, but it could kind of work. They're both very direct in how they communicate, and both definitely enjoy a bit of snark, so personality-wise, they could certainly enjoy each other's company. But when it comes to their other abilities, they sort of balance each other out, with Felix being a non-combatant but the best there is at healing magic, and Ram being, at her best, an extremely strong fighter, but kind of useless at anything practical. Even just by being the best at something a lot of people rely on, and Felix does have the title of Blue, which means he's the best water magic user in Lagunica, does give Felix a similar level of understanding of the pressure that comes with high expectations to Reinhard and Ram, and so could make him someone who gets the weight Ram was carrying in her childhood. So that's about it for the Ram ships. I think Roswaal, after a lot of character development, seems like the most likely endgame pairing for her, if she gets one at all. But there are other characters that there could definitely be some interesting dynamics with if Tappei decided he wanted to go in another direction. I don't think ReZero will end up like a long-running shonen series where everybody gets paired off in the end, but I do also think Tappei will probably consider romances for characters other than Subaru in places, because it would be a bit strange for none of these characters to have had any kind of romance in their lives by the end of a story that takes place over what will probably be a 3-year period for the royal selection. I think Ram is a character he wants to do a lot more with later in the story, and I could definitely see her being one who does get a proper love interest, but we'll have to wait and see. In the meantime, it's always fun to think about ships, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments who else you'd be interested in seeing a ships video about, and please also consider subscribing if you haven't already. I hope you had a great Valentine's Day, and thank you for watching. I hope to see you again very soon.